I laid still, heart racing, not knowing what to do, or if I even wanted him to stop. It's weird how fast a moment can shift from innocent to intimate, how a line can blur without a single word being said. And in that moment, lying on my side in the dark, feeling his hand barely moving against my body, everything in my world suddenly felt complicated. Let me back up. I live with my best friend, Connor. We've known each other since freshman year, but we didn't start living together until this past spring. We were both coming out of different situations. His long-term girlfriend had just moved out, and I was tired of living with strangers I couldn't even trust to wash their dishes. So when Connor texted me out of the blue saying, "Want to split a two-bedroom?" I didn't even think twice. He's straight, at least as far as I know. He's always been the type of guy who gets along with everyone, laid back, funny, naturally flirty without even realizing it. I never read into it. I never let myself. Because that's just who he is, and I wasn't about to complicate our friendship by catching feelings. Not that I hadn't thought about it. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't. Living together only made it worse. Seeing him stumble out of the shower in nothing but a towel, or hearing his late-night phone calls when he didn't realize I could hear through the paper-thin walls, it did something to me. But I kept it all in, quiet, buried. This past Friday, we had one of those long, aimless nights. We both got off work late, ordered wings, and spent the evening on the couch watching bad horror movies and making dumb commentary. Eventually, we ended up in my room. He does that sometimes. Just brings his blanket in and crashes on my floor like it's the most normal thing in the world. I don't question it. But that night, for some reason, I said, "You can sleep up here if you want. The floor sucks." He looked at me, then at the bed, and then shrugged like it was no big deal. "Yeah, all right." We didn't talk much after that. Just lay in the dark, both facing away from each other, the sound of traffic humming outside the window. I could feel the warmth of him behind me, not touching, but close. Too close for me to fully relax. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing I remember is waking up in the middle of the night. At first, I didn't move. It was that half-asleep confusion, trying to remember where I was, what day it was. But then I became aware of something else. Connor was behind me, closer than before. His body was pressed up against mine, his chest against my back, his knees slightly bent to match the curve of mine. His breath was steady, slow, like he was asleep. But his hand was resting lightly on my hip, and it was moving. Slowly, just the fingertips, like he was tracing the seam of my sweatpants without even realizing it. I froze. My mind started spiraling. Was he awake? Was he dreaming? Did he know what he was doing? I could feel the heat radiating off his body. The way his fingers lingered just a little too long in one spot before drifting again. Every tiny movement sent a jolt through my nervous system. My heart was pounding so hard, I was afraid he might hear it. I wanted to say something, to shift, to turn around, but I didn't. Because some part of me, some part one, didn't want to admit, wanted this. Wanted him. His fingers paused. Then they started again. This time, slower, more deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know what to do, or if I even wanted him to stop. I stayed perfectly still, pretending to be asleep, though every nerve in my body was on high alert. I could feel Connor's warmth through the thin layer of my pajamas, the subtle pressure of his chest against my back. It was impossible to ignore, and yet impossible to act on. Time stretched. Each second felt like an eternity. His hand moved again, brushing along my side, a light exploratory touch that sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't help but bite my lip to keep from gasping. I told myself he was asleep, that this was just a dream, that nothing real was happening. But it was happening. I felt his fingers press a little firmer, tracing the curve of my hip before slipping under the waistband of my sweatpants. My stomach flipped. I didn't move. though every instinct screamed at me to either pull away or lean back into him. The line between friendship and something else was disappearing fast, and I had no idea how to stop it. "Connor?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. My throat was dry, my heart hammering. There was no immediate response, just the weight of his body, the slow, deliberate movement of his hand, the warmth radiating from him. "Hey," he murmured finally, almost like a question, his voice low and groggy. "You awake?" I nodded, careful not to make a sound. My body felt like it had been electrified. Every inch of me was alive, every nerve firing at once. I could feel him shift slightly, adjusting so that our bodies were flush, closer than before. Don't move," he whispered, his lips brushing against the back of my neck. My breath caught. I don't know if I should be doing this." That stopped me. The uncertainty in his voice, the raw hesitation made me realize something. He was conscious. He wasn't asleep. Every brush of his hand, every press of his body, every sigh against my skin was intentional. I wanted to speak, to tell him it was okay, to admit that I wanted him too, but I couldn't find my voice. So I stayed still, letting him guide the moment, letting him take the lead while my body responded before my mind could catch up. His hand moved lower, fingers tracing over the fabric of my sweatpants. The warmth of him, the closeness, the vulnerability in his whispered words. It was intoxicating. I felt a strange mix of fear and desire, the kind that made my body tremble even as my mind screamed at me to stop. "You're so warm," he said, almost to himself, a breathy murmur that sent my chest tightening. I didn't think. I could barely process his words before his hand brushed against something far more sensitive, lingering there with deliberate care. I couldn't help the hitch in my breathing. My body reacted without permission. Every touch, every soft caress was magnified in the darkness of the room. And then he paused. For a moment, it was just the sound of our breathing, the faint hum of the city outside, and the pounding of my heart. "I shouldn't," he said again, voice breaking. I reached back, almost instinctively, my hand brushing against his arm, letting him know that I was awake, that I felt the same way, that I wanted him to. He froze for a second, then exhaled, a shaky, relieved sound. You feel it too?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The truth was undeniable. The attraction, the tension, the weeks of small touches and lingering glances, it all boiled over in that single moment. And then he moved again, closer, brushing his lips lightly along my shoulder. The intimacy was shocking, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. I couldn't stop the rush of heat, couldn't stop the shiver that ran down my spine. I didn't want to. It was no longer about guessing, about wondering. Every movement, every touch, every whisper told me one thing. Connor wanted this too. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I let myself believe it could happen. The night held us in that fragile space between hesitation and desire, the quiet breaths and soft touches speaking louder than any words ever could. My heart thundered in my chest, wild and unsteady, as Connor's lips traced slow, feather-light kisses along my shoulder, making my skin tingle. For a moment, I thought I might collapse under the weight of it, the closeness, the raw vulnerability, the unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air. But something inside me tightened, pushing me forward, pulling me into the moment like a tide I couldn't fight. My hand found his, fingers intertwining instinctively, an electric current shooting through me at the simple contact. Connor's breath hitched, and I could feel the tremor in his body pressed against mine. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, voice barely audible against my skin. I turned slowly, careful not to break the fragile spell, and met his gaze in the dim light filtering through the blinds. His eyes were dark and searching, full of confusion and something else, a vulnerability I'd never seen before. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I want to find out." His lips curved into a shaky smile, and he closed the gap between us, pressing his forehead to mine. The warmth of his breath mingled with mine, the steady beat of his heart syncing with my own. The room seemed to shrink around us, every sound fading away until it was just the two of us, suspended in a moment that felt both terrifying and utterly right. Connor's hand slid down my arm, fingertips grazing my wrist before tracing slow circles on the back of my hand. I shivered, caught between fear and anticipation, and for the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like, what could be. His lips found mine, tentative at first, soft and searching, like he was testing the waters. I responded instinctively, leaning in, melting into the warmth of him. The kiss deepened, growing urgent and needy as the weeks of tension and unspoken feelings spilled over. His hand slipped around my waist, pulling me closer, anchoring me to him. I wanted to believe this was the start of something new, something real, something we'd both been too afraid to admit. But even in the midst of the heat, the growing intensity, a small voice whispered at the back of my mind, "What happens after this? What if it's just a moment? What if it changes everything and we can never go back?" Connor pulled back slightly, breathless, eyes dark with a mix of hope and fear. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said softly. I shook my head, heart pounding. "I'm ready. Are you?" His smile was shaky but sure. "Yeah, I think I am." And just like that, everything shifted. The distance between us disappeared, replaced by a raw, tentative connection that felt like both a beginning and a promise. The moment Connor's words hung between us, the weight of everything we'd both been holding back pressed down hard. But for once, neither of us tried to run from it. He reached up, brushing his fingers through my hair like he was trying to memorize the way it felt. The gesture was gentle but filled with an intensity that made my chest tighten. I could hardly believe this was happening, that the guy I'd lived with for months was here, close enough to breathe against me, ready to cross a line we'd both feared. Slowly, his hand slid down from my hair to cup the side of my face, thumb tracing a lazy circle along my jaw. His eyes searched mine, silent and questioning, looking for permission, for reassurance. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "I want this." His smile was small, hesitant, but real. Then he leaned in, and our lips met again, this time deeper, more certain. It wasn't just a kiss. It was an unspoken apology for all the time lost, for all the secrets we'd kept, for the fear that almost tore us apart. His hands began to explore, one sliding under the hem of my shirt, warm fingers tracing every ridge and curve of my ribs. I shivered, but didn't pull away. Instead, I let my own hands wander, tentatively at first, down his back, feeling the taut muscles beneath his shirt. The vulnerability between us was electric. Every touch, every sigh, every breath was a conversation without words. But as much as the moment felt right, part of me was still tangled in doubt. "Connor," I whispered, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. "Are you sure about this? Because if you're not, I don't want to mess up what we have." He chuckled softly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I've never been more sure of anything." That was the moment I realized something had shifted irreversibly between us. No more pretending, no more hiding. We took our time, discovering each other in the quiet dark of my room. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people finally letting down their walls, sharing a side of themselves neither thought would ever be seen. When the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, we were still tangled together, breaths slowing, hearts finally beginning to settle. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and awkward and utterly human, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, this was exactly where I was meant to be. Morning light filtered softly through the blinds, painting the room in muted golds and pale blues. I lay there, tangled up with Connor, the steady rhythm of his breathing, a calming contrast to the storm still raging inside my head. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But reality has a way of sneaking back in. Neither of us spoke right away. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was loaded. Full of questions neither of us knew how to ask, and answers we weren't sure we wanted to hear. Finally, Connor shifted, pulling back just enough to look me in the eyes. "So what now?" His voice was tentative, almost vulnerable. I shrugged, heart pounding. "I don't know. I mean, I didn't expect this to happen, not like this. He nodded, running a hand through his hair, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something softer, more uncertain. Yeah, me neither. It was strange, realizing that the guy who'd seemed so sure of everything was just as lost as I was. We had no map for this. No clear path forward. Just two friends who'd crossed a line and weren't sure if we could ever go back. I guess we have to figure out what this means, I said. For us. For everything. Connor smiled, a little shaky, but genuine. Yeah, and maybe take it one step at a time. The days that followed were a delicate dance. We tried to act normal, like nothing had changed, but the tension was there, crackling under every glance, every touch. The easy camaraderie we'd shared before was replaced by something new and fragile. Sometimes we'd catch each other staring and quickly look away, cheeks flushed and hearts racing. Other times we'd find ourselves sitting closer than necessary, hands brushing accidentally, or not so accidentally, sending sparks that neither of us could ignore. One night as we were cooking dinner together, Connor caught my hand in his and held it a moment longer than usual. I'm scared, he admitted quietly, voice barely above the sizzling of the pan. I squeezed his fingers, feeling the same fear. Me too. But underneath the fear was hope. Hope that this could be something real, something worth risking. Because for the first time, I wasn't just hoping he'd see me as a friend. I wanted him to see me as more. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Connor and I were caught in this new, uncharted territory, where every glance, every touch, every word carried double meaning. We were still roommates, still best friends, but now there was something else simmering underneath, something we both tried hard not to acknowledge out loud. We didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Our friends, our families, they all still thought we were just the usual roommates. Hanging out, maybe a bit too close sometimes, but nothing more. And honestly, I wasn't sure if we were ready to say it out loud either. One evening, after a lazy Sunday where we'd spent hours binge-watching some old sci-fi show, Connor shifted next to me on the couch. His fingers found mine again, that light, familiar touch that had become our secret language. Have you thought about what this means? He asked quietly. I nodded, heart thudding. Every day. He laughed softly, a sound full of both relief and nervousness. Me too. I'm scared of messing this up, but I don't want to pretend anymore. That honesty, it cracked open something inside me. I don't want to pretend either, I admitted, squeezing his hand. But what if it changes everything? Connor shrugged, his eyes locked on mine, steady and real. Maybe it's time to find out. The truth was, we both knew this wasn't just a fling or a moment of confusion. It was something deeper, something neither of us had expected but couldn't ignore. But stepping into that meant risking everything, our friendship, our living situation, and maybe more. We spent the next few days carefully testing the waters. Small kisses when no one was looking, lingering touches in the kitchen, stolen moments that felt like a promise of what could be. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of awkwardness, and the constant, looming question of what came next. One night, lying in bed with Connor beside me, I finally broke the silence. Do you think we can do this? Really be something more? He turned to me, eyes soft but sure. Yeah, I think we already are. And just like that, the fear started to fade, replaced by something that felt like hope. The day it all changed came quietly. No grand gestures, no dramatic confessions. Just the slow unraveling of the careful balance Connor and I had been holding onto, like sand slipping through our fingers. It started with a text. A friend of ours, someone close to both of us, asked if we were more than roommates. The message was casual, but it hit like a punch to the gut. Connor showed it to me with a nervous laugh, eyes searching mine for a reaction. Think we've been too obvious? I shrugged, heart racing. Maybe. From that moment, things shifted. The whispered rumors, the sideways glances from mutual friends, the subtle questions about why we always seemed to be together. None of it was a surprise, but it was jarring all the same. We had to decide, keep hiding or be honest. One night, sitting on the rooftop of our building, city lights flickering below, I looked at Connor and said, "I don't want to hide anymore." He nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Me neither." We started telling people, slowly. First a few close friends, then family. The reactions were mixed. Some supportive, some surprised, a few awkward. But through it all, Connor and I had each other, and that made everything easier. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We had our fights, our insecurities, our moments of doubt. But every morning when I woke up beside him, I knew I'd never trade this for the comfortable distance of just roommates. Looking back, I realized that night, the night I thought he was sleeping but his hand was moving, was the moment everything changed. It was the night I stopped pretending that Connor was just my best friend and started hoping he could be so much more. And maybe, just maybe, he felt the same. The morning after our rooftop talk felt like waking up in a new world. The air between Connor and me had shifted, settling into a rhythm that was both exciting and terrifying. We were no longer just roommates navigating silent boundaries. We were something new, something undefined but deeply real. For the first time in months, I let myself hope. But hope is fragile, especially when it's wrapped in uncertainty. The first hurdle wasn't the big moments. It was the small ones. Like sitting side by side on the couch, fingers occasionally brushing but never quite meeting. Or the way we avoided certain topics, both scared of what might come up if we spoke honestly. One afternoon, I caught Connor staring at me from across the room. His eyes were softer than usual, filled with a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. When I looked back, I saw a flicker of doubt there too. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey." There was a pause. Neither of us knew how to bridge the gap. Finally, Connor sighed and said, "I'm scared, about us." I nodded, swallowing the lump forming in my throat. "Me too." He stood, pacing the small space between us. "What if this ruins everything? Our friendship, our living situation, everything I thought I had figured out." I wanted to tell him that some risks were worth taking, that what we had was worth fighting for. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I reached out and took his hand. The contact was electric, a lifeline in a sea of doubts. "We'll figure it out," I promised. Together, that night, lying in bed with Connor beside me, I felt a mixture of comfort and apprehension. Our bodies were close, but there was still so much distance in the way we touched. Cautious, careful, like we were testing waters that had never been explored. As sleep crept in, I thought about the road ahead, the awkward conversations, the stares, the questions from friends and family. But I also thought about the moments of quiet closeness, the late-night talks, the stolen kisses, the warmth of knowing we weren't alone. Somewhere in the middle of the night, Connor shifted beside me. His hand found mine again, fingers lacing together like they belonged, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. The days after that night on the rooftop felt like walking a tightrope stretched over an endless void. Connor and I were suspended between what was comfortable and familiar and this new, uncertain territory we had decided to step into together. We were out of the closet to each other now, no more hiding behind half smiles or stolen glances. But the world outside our apartment was another story entirely. The first time we went out in public, holding hands, it felt like the whole city was watching us. A crowded coffee shop, sunlight streaming through the windows, but all I could feel was the electricity buzzing between our fingers and the pounding of my heart in my ears. Connor squeezed my hand, his usual confident smirk replaced by a nervous bite of his lip. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I whispered, though my voice was shaky. "Just feels different." "Different can be good," he said, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. It was good. No, it was incredible, but it also made me painfully aware of how much we'd been hiding. How many moments of closeness we had stolen in the shadows while pretending everything was normal. At work, I caught people's sideways glances when I came in with Connor for lunch. Whispers floated through the office like ghosts, some curious, some judgmental. It wasn't always easy. One afternoon, a colleague asked if Connor was just a friend. I hesitated, the words caught in my throat. Before I could answer, Connor smiled and said, "More than that." The look of surprise was immediate, but instead of embarrassment, I felt a rush of pride. Maybe we were ready to stop hiding. But not everyone was as accepting. At home, the tension sometimes bubbled beneath the surface. Our old roommates, friends, would make careless comments, not knowing or not caring about what we were. Some nights, the weight of those looks and whispers made the walls feel like they were closing in. One evening, after a particularly rough day, I found Connor sitting on the couch, staring at his hands. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside him. He shook his head, voice low. "It's just hard sometimes, feeling like we have to explain ourselves, like we're breaking some invisible rule." I wrapped an arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. "We're not. We're just us. And that's enough." He leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Our journey wasn't perfect. It was messy, filled with moments of doubt and fear. But it was ours. Every day, every small victory, every shared smile was a step closer to the life we wanted, the life we deserved. And in those quiet moments, when the world faded away and it was just the two of us, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together. Because sometimes the most unexpected moments, like a hand moving in the dark, can change everything.